Let me start with a question. You have spent 25 years building your retirement corpus, 5 crores, 10 crores, whatever the number. Now, how much can you actually withdraw from it every year? How much can you withdraw and still be confident that the money will last your entire lifetime? The answer is not simple as it looks. Most people assume that if the portfolio generates 8% a year, they can comfortably withdraw 8%. That assumption is a serious mistake. In today's episode, we are going to discuss the concept of safe withdrawal rate. Joining us is Mr. Abhishek Mathur, CFA and co-founder of Vasupradah Investment Advisory Services. Abhishek has spent his career building robust retirement portfolios for some of India's leading financial institutions. He is sharing that expertise with us. By the end of this conversation, three things will be crystal clear. One, how much withdrawal is actually safe. Two, how your asset allocation affects this decision. And three, with real numbers. We will look at how different strategies play out for someone with a 5 crore corpus. Let us get started. Abhishek, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You have spent many years working in retirement planning and portfolio construction. Before we get into the details, what is the one fundamental thing you want our viewers to understand about this topic?
First of all, thank you, Jaideep. Honestly, retirement planning is a bit like crystal gazing. We are planning for 25, 30 years in advance, looking at what's going to happen in that period of time. And really, no one can predict future with precision. And one thing is for sure in retirement, that your expenses are certainly going to hit you every month, and they're likely to increase with inflation. But what is uncertain is the returns, how much your portfolio will grow, how markets will behave, what will be the future inflation rate. So a good retirement plan is really a framework that balances this certainty against the uncertain events that we have in front of us.
Okay, Abhishek, when we design a retirement plan, what are the key factors we need to consider? Can you give us a simple breakdown?
Sure. So certainly, I would like to divide the factors into two categories: internal factors and external factors. Internal factors are a little bit more in our control than the external factors. And the most important factor, I would say, is the withdrawal rate. In some way, it is controllable, in some way, it is not. This is how much money are we going to pull out from our corpus every year, and that is what the withdrawal rate is. And here there's a big misunderstanding. It is assumed that if the portfolio is going to return me 8%, I can safely withdraw 8% from my portfolio. Now that's a flawed logic. And why? It is flawed because it doesn't consider inflation. An expense of 20 lakh rupees today, Jaideep, will inflate to roughly 3 times that amount in 25 years. And what is another problem with inflation is that it is really difficult to imagine, how compounding of inflation can impact your expenses. So if we consume the entire return every year, then there's nothing left to absorb that inflation adjusted withdrawal in the future. So that's one. And there have been various researches which have been done. One of the celebrated research was done by William Benjamin, an analyst in US, and he studied the markets between 1926 and 1976, and this is the US market. And he arrived at the conclusion that a 4% withdrawal rate can be considered as safe. Now, this is way back in history. This is US markets. But it is one of the widely quoted reference point today also when it comes to retirement planning.
Yeah, interesting. What is the next factor?
Yeah, so the next factor is, of course, the expected rate of return. And I'm using the word expected because it's all in future. It depends heavily on your asset allocation strategy. And by asset allocation, I mean how much we are investing in risky assets like equity and how much we are investing in not so risky asset classes like debt. And here the retirees typically, have what I call as the conservative bias. That is because the amount is the corpus, the retirement corpus is something which is very, very important. No, there's a tendency not to take any kind of a risk with your asset allocation and deploy this entire amount in debt and non-risky asset classes. Now that's a big mistake. Over 25 to 30 years of horizon, equity is the only asset class that has consistently beaten inflation. Its volatility reduces significantly over time. So, if you look at, my expectation of return for 1 year versus 2 years versus 10 years, it is significantly different and more certainty. It comes with more certainty. So equity is and should be an essential component of retirement corpus. It is really not the enemy. And so this conservative bias is something which retirees should be really bothered about, should be really looking at. That said, too much of equity is also risk. You can't take greed to override your decision because it increases the volatility. So there has to be a good mix of equity and debt depending upon the situation.
Yeah, you mentioned inflation. Can you go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, so inflation really is a silent killer, and you don't see the impact immediately, but it compounds and quietly destroys the purchasing power. Here is a practical tip. Categorize your inflation into two buckets: a critical expense like your living costs, dailies, medical, utilities, etc., and discretionary expenses like travel, dining out, hobbies, etc. If your critical expenses are only 60 to 70% of the total, you have room to cut back on discretionary expensive if inflation hits very badly for a short period of time. But if the critical expenses are itself very high, say 80% or more, the plan may become more vulnerable during a period of high inflation.
What are the other important factors?
So there are other factors, some more or less internal. For example, the plan duration. It is definitely prudent to plan for the age of 80 and 85. And since we plan along with spouses, typically women, they live 5 years longer than men. So you need to accordingly see your horizon of plan. Then one needs to look at the investment volatility. Now that's something which is not really in our control. There could be long periods of poor performance for the markets. So the plan will need to actually account for a situation like this. There could be downturns arriving at the end of the retirement, or there could be downturns which could arrive right in front. And this is what we call a sequence of return risk. And really, if a downturn arrives very quickly during the retirement, earlier on in requirement, it could have more impact than negative impact on the retirement plan than if it were to arrive at a later period of time. Then there is, of course, an internal factor on whether you want to leave something for your heir and whether you want to consume the principal or leave aside something. So those are also some of the factors which determine your retirement plan.
Okay. Is 100% certainty even possible in a retirement plan?
See, 100% certainty will come at a very high price, and to achieve that, you would need to have a very conservative withdrawal rate, which means you end up underspending and missing experiences that you can actually afford. Now, underspending is also some kind of a loss. And a great retirement requires a shift in mindset from total risk avoidance to calculated risk taking. There is risk in crossing a road also. So absolute safety is not possible. And chasing that is its own cost.
Okay, the theory is clear. Let us make it real now. Let us take a hypothetical case. Say one Mr. Ajay, he is a 55-year-old, has a retirement corpus of say 5 crores rupees and wants to plan for age 80. How do different asset allocation strategies play out for him?
Right. Great question. I mean, this example of Ajay. Now, really, I mean, we can have three allocation strategies. He can be very, very conservative, and by conservative, I mean he's putting in some bit in equity, which is in the range of 20%. Now, this strategy would mean that there is low risk, but also low growth in his portfolio. Then he can have a balanced strategy where he can put a little bit more into equity, say in the range of 40 to 45% into equity. That I would call as moderate risk and moderate growth. And then there is moderately aggressive, where the allocation could be in the range of 55, 56%. But it kind of blends in a lot of growth element into the portfolio. There are three options.
Yeah, let us start with the first strategy, conservative,
Right,
20%
right.
equity. How did that perform?
Okay, so a conservative strategy would mean that Ajay is putting in just about 20% in equity, and now within that there has to be different scenarios on which we can calculate how his retirement corpus is going to work. Let's assume that Ajay decides to withdraw 4% annually from this retirement corpus in this conservative strategy. Maths doesn't work out at all in this case. He is going to likely, because the corpus is not going to grow, he is likely to withdraw from the corpus over a period of time. And at the age of 80, he will just have maybe a year of money left for him. So essentially, there is a longevity risk that is there. And there is also a risk is in case the markets don't perform over a period of time. So it is a risky strategy. Between 3.5 and 3%, there is some improvement in our ability to actually meet up the withdrawal rates over a period of time. But the strategy also has a longevity risk, which is not much of corpus left at the time of retirement. So with a conservative strategy, Ajay can only withdraw at a lower withdrawal rate, say for example, in the range of about 3% or so.
Okay, what about the balance strategy, 44% equity?
The balanced approach works well between 3.5 to 3% withdrawal rate. But interestingly, at 3%, there's a substantial residual corpus left over roughly like 20 years worth of expenses are left, which means that Ajay is effectively underspending at 3%. And he could have enjoyed he could have enjoyed with more expenses during retirement.
And the moderately aggressive strategy, that 56% equity?
So this, in many ways, Jaideep, is the sweet spot for Ajay. A healthy blend of growth and stability. Both 3.5 and 3% withdrawals rates meet the objective. They cover the longevity risk while allowing a reasonable standard of living to be maintained with this strategy.
Okay, Abhishek, can you summarize these three key findings from this study in a simple way for our viewers?
So, first of all, is finding that one asset allocation that is going to meet your requirement. And asset allocation also depends upon your own risk-taking capability. And surprisingly, at a given withdrawal rate, changing the allocation does not significantly alter the probability. But if you're too conservative, then you are actually increasing the longevity risk. So equity is not really an enemy. One has to really accommodate it well in the asset allocation strategy. The second factor, or the second number to look for, is the withdrawal rate itself, and which really matters far more than allocation. So at 4%, the success rate of retirement plan is in the range of 95%. But there are periods while we observe at 4% withdrawal, if the markets don't perform for a prolonged period of time, then there could be failure. The corpus may not be good enough for the retirement. So a 3 to 3.5% withdrawal rate is a much safer rate to withdraw. In this, we also found that none of the simulations really turned up negative in the 80th percentile. So really giving a sense of comfort there. And number three is the risk strategy. And we would all love a risk-free strategy, but unfortunately, it is not available. If a sub-3 withdrawal rate is enough to meet your expenses, then you can afford to take higher risk and enjoy a higher success rate. So remember that there is always some residual risk that is worth taking. There is risk, as I mentioned, in crossing the road, and retirement is meant to be enjoyed and not just survived. So it has to be a nice blend of you being able to enjoy the benefits of this corpus that you've created over a period of time.
Yeah, Abhishek, what we have discussed is really a simplified view based on fixed regular payouts. At Vasupradah, we often tell our clients that real life is more complex than this. Can you give our viewers a bit more clarity on that?
So this example we covered for Ajay was very simple. 5 crore corpus, and he has got fixed withdrawal that he wants to do over a period of time. But in real life, it doesn't happen like that. There could be bullet expenses, like, for example, home renovation or daughter, son's wedding or an overseas holiday. There could be inflows also. There could be some maturities coming into your cash flows, etc. Could be inheritance. And there could also be unforeseen expenses like major medical emergencies being one of the common ones. Now these must be obviously covered with adequate health insurance and specific provisions in the corpus itself. So retirement planning is a little bit complex than just chasing one withdrawal rate. You need to have this entire cash flow available, and based on that, one can actually really get a sense of how well one is doing financially and how well one can afford a good retirement.
Now, Abhishek, thank you so much for sharing these invaluable insights with our viewers today.
Yeah, thank you, Jaideep. And my message is that retirement needs a guidance from an expert, and we would recommend that clients, actually customers and investors, really take that help from qualified people to pan out their retirement plan.
Yeah, let me leave you with 3 clear takeaways from today's conversation. One, the assumption that you can consume your entire portfolio return is wrong. A plan that ignores inflation is no plan at all. 2, do not avoid equity in retirement. Over the long term, it is the only asset class that reliably beats inflation. And 3, a 3% to 3.5% withdrawal rate combined with moderate equity exposure is a robust starting framework for most people. But personalization is essential. Now, a question for you. In your own retirement planning, what withdrawal rate are you targeting? 4%, 3.5%, or 3%? And what does your equity allocation look like? Share it in the comments below. Abhishek and I personally read every comment and reply to the thoughtful ones. Every week, we publish serious research-based investment analysis, wealth building strategies, and retirement planning insights. No tips, no hype, real analysis. Until the next video, invest wisely, plan deeply, and live well. Thank you.